Hello and welcome to the lesson 6 of the CSS series. This lesson is about background properties. So the first property we're gonna go through is background color. We can define either background colors or images. So I'm gonna start with the color property. It's really simple. Background color and the color you wish. In this case, red. So we have the same structure we've been using of 3 boxes. Let me show you the structure. Uh, it's like this, and let's define then the smallest box to red. This is what happens when you use background color. Really simple and easy to understand, but in case you use this property in here, you're gonna see that the entire box is gonna be covered in red. Why is it happening? Because we don't have any colors, any backgrounds, any images, anything above this background in those boxes here. So the background is gonna appear even in here. So you just have to be careful when using background color because of that. So next property is background image. This is how you specify an image, and the next properties are gonna help you customize the image in the background, and they are like all background images properties, not like only for background, but we're gonna get there. So the syntax is URL and the path of the background image. We can of course say that it's in a web page like image.png, but we can also use our folder structure. We are in the place where your CSS file is located, so you have to be aware of that. If the CSS file is in your root folder, this path is based on your root folder. So images is a folder and myself is the image. For example, if there was a folder called CSS and this file was inside this folder, we would have to do this. That indicates that we want to go one level up and then enter the images folder. So this is what happens when you define a background image. The image is gonna go to the background, and by default is gonna be repeated until it covers the entire area. So let's go then to the properties which may help you change this default behavior. The first property is background size. As you can see, this is the size of the image, the real size, but we can define a different size. For example, our box is 400 pixels for 400 pixels. Let's say we want the image to be exactly the same. It may get a little distorted if you do that, so I don't recommend changing the size of the image unless you are changing the width only or changing it to a smaller size. Well, how do we change the width only? This is the width of our image and this is the height. If we declare only the width, the height is going to be automatic. in order not to create distortions. So this is what happened here. We can also use percentage, set that we want the size to be 50% of our box, our parent, and this is what happens within the background size property. Next property is background repeat. As you can see, the behavior by default is to repeat, but we can say no repeat in case we don't want this to happen. We can say repeat X, which means it's gonna repeat only horizontally, because and then we can define repeat Y, that is the opposite of repeating X, so it's gonna repeat vertically. This is the default behavior repeat. So now we can move to the latest property, background position, which defines where we want the background image to start. So the default is 0, 0 or top left. This is more intuitive. So yeah, top left, the initial image. Let me add no repeat here for an easy understanding. The position where the image is defined is here, top left. We can of course change this to top right or bottom left. So this is how position works. We can also define values for this position. The same way we can use pixels or percentages with position, we also can do it. So the width is 50 pixels from the left margin, and the height is 50. This is how the background position behaves. If you don't specify a height value, it's gonna be 50% by default. So I think we covered the most important background properties. Now I'm gonna show you a quick look at the background shorthand property that is like all in one. We of course have to say where our image is. We can say no repeat because we don't want, and we can use top right. So this is what is being generated using only one comment. This property is kind of tricky if you want to use background size as well. So it happens because background size works with values, but background position may work with values as well. So I recommend you reading a little further if you want to use this property in a more advanced way. I'm just gonna show you one small example that is 50%, actually 15 pixels and 15 pixels slash 20 pixels, 20 pixels. What is this slash and what is this what's happening here? The first property is position, the second is size. So 15 pixels of margin and 20 pixels of size. Let's see if it works. Yeah, it does. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you could have understand how the background properties work. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson. by.